welcome back to the As It Should Be podcast YouTube channel. Paul Bertolino here, and it's time to do another Ranking the Albums video. And this time I'm going to be ranking the studio albums, all 9 studio albums of The Doors. Yeah, and, it seemed like after doing, I did a couple of Ranking the Albums, my most recent ones, where I only did partial discographies because I was too lazy to go into the crappy later albums that I didn't really know that well, and I didn't want to revisit them, so I only wanted to cover, known ground. Well, with The Doors, I don't really have to do that because the discography is pretty short to begin with, and when it comes to the crappy later albums, just a couple albums, go back and revisit them, and, well, there you go, make a list. So, so I'm doing the 9 Doors albums, and, before I get started, I just want to say, subscribe, click the little bell when you subscribe, like the videos, comment, tell me which Doors albums are your favorite, which order you like them in, tell me what you think of those crappy later Doors albums, and, the post-Morrison albums, don't get me wrong, I'm not talking about L.A. Woman and Morrison Hotel here. Just let me know what your thoughts are on the subject, and, tell me how stupid I am for choosing the ones that I chose, and all that, whatever you want to do. But, so, let's get started. And let me pull up my list over here. Excuse me, while I do a little technical stuff here. And you are there. This is behind the scenes. It's a behind the scenes moment. Okay. So, alright, let's get into number 9. And number 9, as you might suspect, is Other Voices. Yeah, Other Voices is their second 1971 album. It's the first album after Jim Morrison died, and, it's Robbie Krieger and Ray Manzarek on vocals, and, yeah, the Doors as a trio. And, L.A. Woman had, the L.A. Woman had come out in April of 71. Morrison died in July, so that's only a couple months right there. And then, only 3 months after that, in October, they put out Other Voices. Now, the reason for that is because they were really already working on this album when Morrison was alive. A lot of the stuff was really intended at the time, not only when it was written, but even when some of it was recorded, was intended for Morrison to come in and finish it. So, and as a result, some of the stuff really, before the vocals come in, when you put on these songs, it's like, yeah, this is The Doors. This sounds like The Doors. This sounds like the album after L.A. Woman. But then, then the voice comes in. Then the other voice comes in and completely ruins everything. But for years and years, I've had these albums, just like every Doors fan out there. Even if you don't like them or don't want to listen to them, you kind of have to have them for completionist purposes, right? And I actually, even though it's still at the bottom of my list, I went back and revisited these the 2 Doors trio albums when I was getting ready to make this video, and was actually surprised for the first time to find that there were actually songs that I kind of liked. I mean, the vocals are an issue throughout, but some of the songs I kind of like, and and depending on how the vocals are approached, the vocals don't bother me that much on a couple of songs. Now, on this album, my very favorite track by far is Ships with Sails, which was written by it was co-written by John Densmore and some other dude, right? Isn't that right? Each Other Voices in Full Circle each have a song by John Densmore co-written. And I think this is the one that was co-written by a dude who wasn't in the band, that I don't remember his name. But I think this is by far the best song on the album. Manzarek sings on it, and he really has a really nice double-tracked vocal. And that's the thing about Manzarek's vocals. He often tries to do like a sort of a raucous, balls-out, raw, rock and roll vocal, and he sounds absolutely terrible. On a song like this, where he sings a little softer, and there's a little production on his vocals, and he double-tracks his vocals, it's not that bad. It's pretty passable. Not great, because he really is a terrible singer, but pretty passable. And, that makes this by far the most listenable track on the album. But I also kind of like In the Eye of the Sun, which is the opening track. I mean, if you haven't heard the album before and you put on that opening track, when the track begins, you're like, whoa, it's a Doors song I've never heard, because you're ready to hear Morrison come in. It sounds like the next Doors album. And then Ray's voice comes in, and, but musically, these records really aren't that bad. You can really go through this stuff and go, yeah, I can really hear where Morrison could have done something with this, where this could have turned into a pretty good Doors track. Hang On to Your Life is my other favorite track on this. This is that's the closing track, and I guess it's sort of like the epic closing track, because the Doors always have to have those, right? And, well, they could only be so epic without Morrison, so it really isn't that epic. But it is a longer track that goes through different phases and stuff, and, again, I don't think Manzarek sounds that bad on that one. But the worst track by far, on an album that has quite a few crappy tracks, the worst track by far is I'm Horny, I'm Stoned. Written by Robbie. Everything about it's terrible. The music is terrible, the vocals are terrible, the lyrics are terrible, the title is, well, along with the lyrics, is just, huh? Really? Morrison could not have saved that one. In fact, it probably wouldn't have made the album had Morrison lived. So there you go. Yeah, Other Voices, number 9. So now at number 8. Number 8 brings us to Full Circle. As you might have known. As you might have known. I mean, I'm sure I'm not shocking you that these two albums are at the bottom of the list. But even with that, like I mentioned before, having gone back and revisited these for this video, I don't dislike them as much as I used to, or as much as I remembered disliking them. I'm not going to start putting them on and listening to them from now on, but, I mean, they're not they're not a complete wash, for me personally at least. This is 1972, this is a 1972 follow-up to Other Voices. My favorite track on the album is The Piano Bird, which is the other John Densmore track. And I believe that's the one that was co-written with John Densmore and Robbie Krieger. I may be confusing them. One of the Densmore tracks was co-written with Krieger, and the other one was co-written with some other rando whose name I don't remember. This might be that one. So, Piano Bird is my favorite track on Full Circle, and, it's kind of jazzy. It has flute in it that I think really takes it to a really kind of cool realm, and, like a totally listenable track for me personally. Vertilac, is that how you pronounce that? Is a pretty good track. The lyrics are kind of not so great, but I kind of like the track. I like the double track vocals, I like the feel, I like the music, and, that's one of the better tracks on the album. 4 Billion Souls, which I think is the second track on the album. Now, that's a Robbie Krieger track, and he's the one who sings that. It sounds like Gary Lewis and the Playboys. I mean, really, go back and listen to that. Go back and listen to that song. It sounds like Gary Lewis and the Playboys in 1972, but it sounds like Gary Lewis. I mean, not only does the song kind of sound like something Gary Lewis could have done in 72, but Robbie sounds like Gary Lewis. That said, I kind of like it. It's not that bad. I mean, to qualify my statements here, the tracks that I kind of like on this album and on Other Voices, I certainly don't rate them up anywhere near anything with Morrison, but on their own terms and not being unfair as to put them up against, the best or even the worst of the stuff with Jim Morrison, I can find things to like about them. And what else is there? It Slipped My Mind. Now, It Slipped My Mind is one of the tracks I like on this album. It's the most Doors-like. I mean, instantly when it comes on, you're like, oh, yeah. I mean, it's kind of almost in that Love Me Two-Time kind of Doors vibe. And, I mean, you can easily hear Morrison singing on this. I mean, when you listen to the song and imagine Jim singing it, even the lame lyrics, it's so easily could have been one of his songs. And what's I don't have my glasses on, folks, so I'm kind of squinting. I'm doing the Morocco mole thing here. No, that's all the songs I like on the album. And beyond that is, this lame, honky-tonk style tracks like Good Rockin' and Hardwood Floor, crappy. And then there's the big single off the album, The Mosquito, which is crap. So, anyway, let's go on to number 7. And, number 7 is, nobody's going to be shocked. Absolutely nobody. American Prayer. Yeah, now, I'll tell you something. When I initially drew up this list, I actually had American Prayer at the bottom of the list. Yes, even below the trio albums. And that was because and this was before I'd gone back and, like, revisited them and kind of had a refresher course on these albums. Just by pure memory, I put American Prayer at the bottom. And the reason being, because I'm not really that big on the whole American poet Jim Morrison thing, and, you know, spoken word poetry from Morrison and all that kind of stuff, you know, over music. It's just like, I mean, I like Texas Radio and the Big Beat. That's a really great example of that kind of thing. But this whole album of Morrison, you know, doing his poetry thing, I never was that hot on it. And with Other Voices in Full Circle, I thought, well, at least it's original songs where, you know, it's kind of like, it's still the Doors, kind of at that time, musically still kind of sounding like the Doors. I don't know, it's twisted logic, but yeah, I had American Prayer at the bottom. So when I went back and I listened to these, and I kind of went back over American Prayer and listened to it for the first time in years and years, I went, hold up. Sorry, Other Voices in Full Circle, but American Prayer is indeed above them. And yeah, you know, it's much better than I remember. And I really, really love the tracks that the Doors did for this. I mean, it's so distinctly the Doors. I mean, in 1978, these guys get together and write and record backing tracks for this music, and it could be nobody else. You listen to this music, and there is nobody else this could possibly be. This is the Doors. It's just, that's the thing about them, is that a lot of people think that Jim Morrison, that it's all about Morrison, that it's just about him, and he was the Doors, and he could have had any of the three guys behind him and been just as good. Not so. That band is all about all four of those guys. If you take any one of those guys out of the equation, it changes drastically and it becomes something else. And, you know, right down to John Densmore, yep, even the drummer. And it's proof. I mean, you go and you listen to just 2 seconds of one of those tracks from American Prayer without Jim's voice, just the music. You know who you're listening to. It's the Doors, distinctly. So, yeah. Anyway, so let's go to number 6. And now we are officially into the proper Doors albums, the proper, within Jim Morrison's lifetime, Doors albums. And, well, and here's where you're going to start disagreeing with me. Yeah, here's where you're going to start sending in the hate mail. And, well, at the bottom of that list, at number 6, is Morrison Hotel. Yeah, I know. Don't worry, it'll be okay. Yes, I have Morrison Hotel at number 6 as my least favorite Morrison-era Doors album. And it's not because it's a bad album. I just like all the albums better. I mean, granted, I guess I genuinely just don't like this album as much as the other ones. I mean, Waiting for the Sun, absolutely great track. I mean, a stunning track. In fact, I cannot understand why that was left off of the Waiting for the Sun album. It's 1,000 times better than one of the songs on that album that I'll mention when I get to that album. And Spy's a great song, Indian Summer, and, you know, the Indian Summer is very, it has the end vibes, you know what I mean? It's very end-like. I don't really like Maggie McGill that much, and You Make Me Real, it's a little generic. It's good, but it's a little generic. Like, when they try to do, like, straight-ahead rockers on this album, I feel like they come up sounding a little generic. And, you know, I'm not that big on Land Ho. Land Ho's a good song, but I'm not really into it. But Peace Frog is a song that I always really, really liked when I was younger, but I got sick of it. And Roadhouse Blues, great track, but man, did I get sick of that one. And, yeah, this is one album that's really filled with songs that I either am not that big on, or I just got plainly sick of. And, yeah, so it's at number 6. Sorry. Alright, so now we're going to go up to number 5. And number 5, I have a great album. In fact, I don't think this album is loved enough, really. And I think some people that I know who like the Doors haven't even given this a listen, because they just think because of when it came out that it can't be good. Wasn't it wrong? Yeah. Well, this is L.A. Woman. Yeah, L.A. Woman, the final album with Jim Morrison. Came out in April 1971. And, well, it's actually, strangely, I find this really odd. L.A. Woman is actually the lowest charting of all the Morrison-era Doors albums. And the reason why I find that so weird is because Morrison died 2 months after it came out. Shouldn't that make the album skyrocket to number 1? Not in this case, man. It only went to number 9, which is the lowest placement of any of the first original Six Doors albums. And I mean, the thing about that is that not only did you have the power of Morrison dying, that alone, like I said, should have made it go to number 1, but I mean, it has singles like Lover Madly, Riders on the Storm, the title track. Are you kidding me? I mean, how could that record not have charted higher? Now, I'll tell you what, as much as I love those tracks, my very, very, very favorite track on this album is the opening track, The Changeling. Ooh, man, what a track. And I tell you what, I distinctly remember the first time I heard that. I remember going, whoa, this is the Doors in the 70s. This is the Doors in the 70s. It doesn't sound like anything before it. And it sounds so good. And it's a track like that that makes me really wish that Morrison had lived long enough for them to go a little deeper into the 70s, because they would have made some pretty cool records. I think, in light of that track alone, I think sort of points to where they could have gone in really cool directions in the 70s. But Hyacinth House is a really great track on that album. Now, some of the straight-ahead blues tracks on that, Cars Hits by My Window and Crawling Kingsnake, are okay. They're a little boring. They're a little, pedestrian. Been Down So Long is a great blues track. And that's another thing about this album. I feel like it's kind of two halves. It's kind of two albums running at the same time. It's a gut bucket blues album and like a really great new Doors album, with the likes of L.A. Woman, Lover Madly, Riders on the Storm, and Hyacinth House. So I kind of think really it would have been a better album if the entire album had been in the vein of the non-bluesy tracks, because they had just done a blues album with Morrison Hotel, and the blues can be boring. The Doors don't need to do a whole string of blues albums, but that's just my opinion. I'm sure some of you people are going to tell me I don't know what I'm talking about. You do not understand this artist. Maybe I don't. You probably do. All right, so let's go into number 4. Track number 4. I mean, and also I actually should point out, though, my comments about the straight-up blues stuff, that's really just my taste. I'm not really that into straight-up blues stuff, but honestly, I will say, Morrison was absolutely stellar at it. He actually is an absolutely phenomenal blues singer. So if you're into that kind of stuff, he really does do it right. So there is that. So I will say that. All right, so let's go to number 4. And number 4 is an album that, I almost put it higher. This was a record that I always historically had low on my list. And then when I made the initial draft of this list, I had it higher. And then I went over it again, and it went back down again. And that is Strange Days. Yes, the second Doors album, Strange Days. And, I mean, I love it. It's a great record, but I just like the other ones on this list better. I mean, but it opens with one of my very, very, very favorite Doors songs, Strange Days, the title track. Man, Strange Days is probably a top 3. I can't. That was the song, the very first Doors album I ever had as a kid was the Weird Scenes Inside the Goldmine comp. That was a hand-me-down from my uncle. And Strange Days was such a standout track on that. I mean, I just instantly took to that. It was just so, and it never ever got old. I've never gotten sick of that. To this day, I can easily go, boom, absolutely one of my stone-cold favorites. The problem I always had with this record is that stuff like Your Lost Little Girl and Unhappy Girl and My Eyes Have Seen You, while I like those songs a lot more now, I used to really not like them. I used to find those to be kind of B-sidey and kind of, just not up to par as songs. And, but, they've kind of grown on me a bit. But they're definitely not as good as the non-standard, non-hit album tracks from the first album. You know what I mean? It's a little bit of a step down. So, anyway, let's move on to number 3. Boy, oh boy, are you going to tell me I'm wrong here. And you already know that this album is up way higher than you would put it because I haven't mentioned it yet. Yeah, well, number 3, I do have The Soft Parade. Yeah. Now, people really kind of don't like this one. I mean, not everybody dislikes it. You know, some of you are going to say, oh, no, I love that album. As well you should. As it should be, because it's a great record. Now, I understand why people would say it's not that good, or why people consider it a lesser Doors album. It's not really lost on me. And really, technically, I could see where you would have a strong case of saying Strange Days and Morrison Hotel and L.A. Woman are better albums. But I just, for whatever reason, simply like the Soft Parade better. If I'm going to go reach for an album to listen to, I'm more likely to put on the Soft Parade than Strange Days. For whatever reason, it's just the way it hits me. Now, part of it could be that that's one of the earliest proper Doors albums that I owned. So that has a little bit of a, honeymoon period with the Doors when I was a kid, kind of a thing going on. Could be partly that. But it also, I like the things about it that a lot of people hate. Like the popular elements. I like the horn arrangements and string arrangements. I like that kind of stuff. And, they did that deluxe edition reissue a couple of years ago, right? Where they did new mixes where they mixed out the horns and mixed out the strings and got it, the Doors only mixes, right? Well, what happens though, and I was really interested to hear that myself because I know that's what all people always hated about it. And even though I like those things about it, I always felt like they were a bit loud in the mix. So I thought it was going to be really interesting to hear these tracks without these elements. And then when I listened, I realized this doesn't work because these tracks were arranged to include the horns and the strings. You take those things out, and the tracks are empty. And I know Robbie went in and he tried to kind of compensate by doing new lead parts to kind of fill in certain holes, but it just didn't work for me. And so I'm pro horns and strings for this record. My favorite songs, Shaman's Blues, bar none, absolutely my favorite song on the album. Wishful Sinful, great track. I love Touch Me, a great, gorgeous ballad single. I don't care if it's a sellout song. It's a great sellout song. And, Tell All the People, the opening track with all the horns and everything, I like it. I don't know what to tell you. The only song that I straight up think is lame on the album, that's lame and I don't like it, is Easy Ride. Now, honestly, I think if they had put Who Scared You, the B-side from one of the singles, on instead of Easy Ride, Soft Parade would be a perfect album in my opinion. So, I mean, come on. Wild Child, Runnin' Blues, great. I don't really like the Robbie Krieger song chorus on it. It kind of gives you an idea of what those trio albums are going to sound like. But great song just the same. And title track, Soft Parade, what an epic track that is. And they always have epic tracks at the end, like I mentioned. So, all right, so let's go on to the next one. We have just two more, and you know what they are, but you don't know what order they're going in. How will this work? Okay, well, at number two, I have what is actually, I think, the first proper Doors studio album that I had my hands on and got into. Waiting for the Sun. Waiting for the Sun. Man, what an album. What an album. It's 1968. This is the third album. And now, that album really takes me back to the days when I was in high school, and my friend Dale Gore and I, he worshipped the Doors. Worshipped them. He walked around in leather pants and a leather jacket, and he had shoulder-length curly hair. He kind of thought he was Morrison. And, he always claimed he was a poet, but I never actually read any poetry by him. Whatever. We were in high school. We were dumb. But anyway, so, of course, every time I was together with him, we always listened to the Doors. And Waiting for the Sun was one of the albums we listened to most. So, this record, more than any other Doors album, I think, takes me, and the first one, take me back to a particular time in my life, even though they're really evergreen albums that are still great. But, and I will say that Waiting for the Sun is the only album that actually went to number one. Out of all these great Doors albums, the only one that actually went to number one is Waiting for the Sun. But, Jesus Christ, Love Street, Not to Touch the Earth, Summer's Almost Gone, Spanish Caravan, We Can Be So Good Together, Yes, the River Knows. But the only track that I don't like on the album, and this is the one I alluded to earlier in the video, My Wild Love. I don't like that track. Now, it was never a favorite, and then I hit a turning point when I saw that god awful Oliver Stone Doors movie when they're in the when they're in the desert doing peyote and they start singing "My Wild Love, Man." Right there, I started hating the song. Like that movie made me hate that song. Now, when I think about it in my head, I'm like, well, you know what? I don't think I hate the song, but I don't really like it. So, yeah, that is the song that shouldn't be on there, and the title track should have been on there. How amazing would this record be with that? Okay, which brings us to my number one Doors album. You know what it is, and many of you will probably agree with this. Some of you won't. Let me know in the comments. Yeah, well, my number one Doors album is the number one Doors album. The debut, The Doors. Yeah, 1967, January 1967. Now, this one almost went to number one, but it stalled at number two. And boy, did it deserve to go number one. Because, I mean, you know, what greater Doors album could there possibly be than this? I mean, it just has this, it has such a great vibe of just, you know, they sound green, but they sound really enthusiastic, and they sound really excited to be in the studio. Morrison sounds noticeably younger, and maybe it's just because, you know, he hasn't really been through all the stuff that he's going to go through in the next year that'll make him sound so much older by the time we get to Waiting for the Sun. But, also the Doors really hadn't been a band for very long by the time they did this record, so they're probably really still kind of, you know, they're probably still sort of crystallizing, really, for lack of a better word, when they're making this record. And it just really is this magic album where I would say it was perfect, but it's actually not, because there's a song on this album that I don't like. I know, that's not supposed to be the case. I'm not supposed to not like a song on this album, but there is one. Whiskey Bar, yes, Alabama song. I've never liked that song. I really, really wish that they had to have had something else, something better to put on the record. But that's okay. Everything else on this record is so good that I can overlook that track. I mean, you know, Break On Through obviously is what could be more of a classic opening, not only an opening track of their debut album, but just like it's like a manifesto. Like it introduces the Doors. No other song could introduce the Doors to the world like that one. You know, Soul Kitchen, Crystal Ship, talk about one of the best songs. 20th Century Fox, Light My Fire, which unbelievably, I am not tired of Light My Fire. I am not sick of that song. I don't know how. Maybe it's because it's a great song. And Backdoor Man, End of the Night, Take It As It Comes. I mean, the end, obviously. Come on. Yeah, I mean, that's the first Doors album is probably one of the greatest albums ever recorded by anybody, really. I mean, what an amazing piece of work, right? And, you know, some people are probably like, oh, God, I'm so sick of that record. What are you going to do? I for some reason, I just don't get sick of it. And it's my number one. So, yeah, there you go. That's my ranking of the Doors albums. And, again, let me know how you rank them. Tell me what you think of those trio albums. Let me know, do you guys like any of the songs on Other Voices and, Full Circle? I mean, do any of those tracks, do you guys like Manzarek's vocals? Do you guys like Krieger's vocals? I mean, I don't know. I'm really interested. But, well, that's that. Like, subscribe, click the bell, comment, all that good stuff. And I'll see you in the next video.